Welcome back on UPFront on the Joy News channel. Just like I said, we are having a conversation on the debt restructuring of Ghana and the recapitalization of banks that participated in the domestic debt exchange program. To help me, go into this issue is a banking consultant, Dr. Richmond Etuahine, who is joining me via Zoom. Doc, good evening.
Good evening.
Well, Doc, how are you doing? And how is everything?
I'm doing great. And you?
Well, I'm also fine. Well, let's start from the MPC press release that was actually put out by the Bank of Ghana. And if you compare the most current MPC report to the one that was previously released, the central bank says that banks are liquid. Do you agree with this assertion?
Well, to a certain extent, I will agree because people haven't got options. All that they have to do is to either buy treasury bill or put their money in the deposit account for a fear of what happened in the DDP. So the banks seem to be very liquid because the alternatives are very, very limited. That is why I think a lot of money find themselves in the banks' books.
Right, so you believe that the banks are currently liquid?
Well, as I have said earlier, to a certain extent, it is true because customers don't have many options. So what they do is that they just put the money in deposit accounts or put it in a fixed deposit or savings. So basically, the banks are enjoying a very good position of getting liquidity. So for me, what the governor said, that would, to a certain extent, it is true.
Right, let's go to the domestic debt exchange program and look at the participation rate of commercial banks. The first round of the DDP that took place, we saw that there was a lot of load on banks. Was there anything that changed in the second round that had to do with a whole restructuring of the program? Hello, Doc? Doc, can you hear me?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think I will go back. There has been a statement saying that the banking sector. Can I hear you? You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Doc.
Can you hear me?
Please go ahead. I can hear you.
Hello?
Doc, I can hear you.
What I'm saying is that, thank you very much. What I'm saying is that a certain statement has been made that the banking system sector is resilient. For me, that statement needs to be qualified, really needs to be qualified. The mere fact that it is liquid does not make it resilient. That resilient there, the matrices used in measuring banks, one is liquidity, one is the non-performing. Unfortunately, if you look at literature by Levine and Valencia in 2018 IMF country report, any country that has close to 20% of non-NPL or non-performing asset, that banking sector is in crisis. So that I want us to get it straight that certain pronouncements are made that Ghanaian banking system is resilient. No, especially with a high non-performing of 18 point something percent, close to 20. And the literature says specific, any country that is close to 20 or above 20, your banking sector is in crisis. There is no two ways about that. It's liquid though, but being resilient according to non-performing, it is not at all.
But this brings me to this question. If you have non-performing loans around more than 20%, how then do you say that banks are liquid?
Well, they are liquid because, you see, the liquidity turns into loans and the loans go bad. But currently, if you look at the statement that they made, credit to the private sector has dwindled, has declined so much that the banks are getting no options where to put their money. So basically, all that is why you see the oversubscription of treasury bills every week. I mean, last week I saw some percentage. I couldn't believe it because the banks don't find it convenient to lend to the the real sector of the economy. And that is what is very, very dangerous. And they are not able to do that because the non-performing at that area is too high, very, very high. There is no country in this sub-region which has close to 20%, except Ghana. And one of the matrices by Levin and Valencia, 2018, IMF report, it says that any country where your non-performing get close to 20 and above 20, then you are in crisis. So that word being used, from the literature point of view, empirical evidence clearly show that that statement is a bit incorrect.
Right. So let's link the liquidity of the banks to, what the whole debt restructuring had to do. In terms of the banks that participated, if you look at the rates, just like you said, the heaviness on them was too much until they decided that the Bank of Ghana has to take majority of the burden. Are you saying that what the strategy that was used by the government in the whole debt restructuring process, especially in the second round, putting most of the burden on Bank of Ghana, helped the banks to be at the status that they are now in terms of the liquidity?
Thank you very much. I quote the governor word in a December banking dinner conference. He said in December, I think 23rd, he said they had to tweak the DDEP so many times. They did. I have worked almost four various scenarios. And if you look at the last scenario, where the burden was shifted from the banks to the central bank, you could see that there were extra pressures from the owners of the banks. Because let us say, I have bought a government bond, a bank, a shareholder, and suddenly you decide to basically destroy it. What I mean, destroy it means that 19.1 tends to be 9.1 over a period of those days, earlier one, a period of 15 years. And that led to the losses, and the losses impact in both solvency and liquidity. So I think after the government has gone run through by their consultant, they realized that there was a softer spot where they can do the debt restructuring. That is why Bank of Ghana has to take the chunk, which is about 34.7 billion, which is out of the 41 point something billion of the banks. Bank of Ghana had to shoulder 34.7 billion. So in terms of that, one will realize that they had to change these goalposts so that the banks do not come back. Because if what they did earlier, the one that we looked at first, if they have done that, almost about 9 banks would have to recapitalize by this time. And that was the first IMF country report said that there was going to be recapitalization.
Doc, you speak of 9 banks that will have to go through recapitalization. Are these banks local banks or foreign ones?
The earlier one that we did, it was both local and foreign. If you remember, banks like IPSA, banks like South African, I've forgotten the South African banks, they all started talking about capital implementation. And at that time, all these, even including Zenith and Nigerian banks, they were going to be hit hard. I think that was one reason why the government decided that, look, if I don't take it, I'm going to destroy this banking sector. So let me take a hit from Bank of Ghana, which I believe Bank of Ghana is a bank for everybody. For everybody. So if you take a hit, there's no problem. But if those banks, everybody was going to take the hit that we worked out, then we were going to be in serious trouble. So the government decided, the Minister of Finance decided that, look, let me use, and the consultant, and this paper they have done, we have done it continuously, persistently. From December, I think we've done about 5 models, and every model we got it right.
Well, Doc,
the last one they did.
If I remember, the first paper that you put out, you listed that 8 local banks were exposed to solvency issues or crisis. The second one and the subsequent ones that you did, has there been any change?
Yeah, the impact has reduced considerably. The impact has reduced considerably because you see the losses earlier one was 41.3 billion as against the 7.3. And the 7.3, I mean, apart from one or two, I think two of them, which were already down, I think the rest are not going to have that problem as they had with the first one.
Let's go on our screens and show this graphic, the Ghana's domestic debt exchange program. Let's do an overview for those of us watching us from home to appreciate what we are talking about. So you look at the first DDEP and the total target was somewhere 96.1 billion Ghana cedis. After the review, we saw that about 90.7% participation. That was the first DDEP program. And then we said that, this was very shallow, so we decided to add pension funds where we had participation of 95%, and local bonds denominated in terms of the dollar, about 91.7%. Cocoa bills, which there's actually an issue with that, 97.4%. Then Bank of Ghana non-marketable bonds, 100%. Doc, 100%. Are you really relating this to the fact that what you said, that there was a revision and that Bank of Ghana decided that they are going to take majority of the burden and let the banks have, that fiscal breathing space to actually operate?
If you look at the last one, the first and the second and the third, there was no mention of cocoa bills.
Yeah.
There was no even mention of Bank of Ghana marketable bonds or the non-marketable bonds. But when the matter came to the crunch and they look at the first model, the first scenario, they realized that the banks were going to be destroyed. And they had no option. With the help of their consultant, decided to take a second look by including the cocoa bill, the US domestic bonds, and the Bank of Ghana. If you look at these three, they took a lot of hit, more than what was done previously.
Okay, so one strategy that you spoke about was in your paper is that, banks need to be liquid. And that one thing that Bank of Ghana is doing through its recapitalization program is to offer the banks bonds. And you are saying they are not really good. What can you say about that too?
Well, it is quite unfortunate. It is quite unfortunate that we are talking about giving bonds. I have made a paper earlier referring to what happened in the 80s. When the bonds were given to the banks, they were able to go to Bank of Ghana and it was discounted at a certain rate. So that you put them in terms of liquidity and in terms of solvency. Currently, I think they're only looking at the solvency because it's a paperwork. And don't forget, the level of trading in the bonds, basically it has nothing to write to me about.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody wants to buy government bond as it is. Because what do you keep it for? When you have suffered just about a year ago.
Well, so if they are not really tradable, then why is Bank of Ghana or the government using this strategy to actually recapitalize them?
Let us put it to the face of the minister. I'm sure Bank of Ghana, with this experience in the 80s, would have recommended that at least 50% should be in cash and 50% maybe in bonds, so that here you support the liquidity and the solvency. And the literature says that countries that have defaulted on their debts, you cannot reissue a bond as zero rated at all. Literature say it. You can check the literature. Unfortunately, what you're giving to them is just as a paper to show up. But ideally, the banks are not looking for just the paper. They need liquidity to run, especially those banks that suffered. The bank that they give 2.5 billion. I don't want you to mention their name. They suffered as far as the local banks is concerned. If you take the topmost bank in Ghana, local bank, they were the next to have suffered. And if you're going to recapitalize them and you decide that I will give you another bond, I mean, what is it? At least go back to our history. Go back to what we did in the 80s. The bonds were given by the government, and Bank of Ghana were given the right to discount it, I think, at an interest of 8%. And that put those banks, NIB, Social Security Bank, all them, they all became liquid and started working. The practice has been done, and I'm wondering why. Here in this country, it's only few people who have the knowledge. But if you read other literature, you realize, even Ghanaian literature, you will confirm what I'm saying, that bonds cannot be given to the banks at the moment, especially some of the banks. They are there possibly existing. But if they were given liquidity to shore them up, it means that they will pass both the IFRS 13 for liquidity, and that will help them. Unfortunately, I came back and I heard that they've been giving bonds. And I said, are they tradable at all? Who wants to buy it? What is the market? Unless he's going to create a market for it.
I mean, currently the
market is
the government bonds market is, you could say that, has collapsed. So how are the banks going to trade them? Yeah.
Yeah, that is what I'm saying now. I would have thought, because we were told they have $500 million. And they were hoping that, well, World Bank will give them 250 to make it 750. By my small calculation, if you multiply even by 12, you're talking close to 9 billion. And if you were to give these banks, and then give them one for maybe what you think is solvency, but you don't just decide to give banks more. And they have to, and I'm very unfortunate. Nobody seems to be talking about this. It's very sad, because you see, they are not doing a great service to the banking sector. Because if I'm dealing with one bank and I realize that you are illiquid, you only buy by bonds, even interbank dealings where we want to lend to you, I will not possibly lend to you overnight. No. Now that bank would have to tread cautiously, because people think that there can be contingent effect. If you give you money and you don't have money to come and repay, wow. So I would advise, sincerely advise, it's never too late to look at what they have done in order to strengthen the Financial Stability Fund. If they do, to go just the way they are going.
Well, just look at the participation rate of commercial banks in the T-bill market. The fact that they look at it and they see very lucrative, interest rates or coupons, and most of them are now using this means as a way of getting quick liquidity. What do you say about that as well?
You see, they are falling into the same trap when they went to the bonds. This is a poor risk management. I would tell them it's a poor risk management. You haven't suffered just from the bonds, and then you decide to turn and support to buy treasury bills. Instead of you looking for the real sector of the economy, to give money to them to turn the economy around for economic recovery, they are just buying bills and bills and bills and bills. And this economy will not turn around as the banks wants to make cheap fund. We used to call it lazy banking. Let me repeat, it is lazy banking. Lazy banking means that if I buy 1 billion for 1 year, I'll sit in my office and I make, say, 27%. 27 of to the 1 billion. A lot of money. You only go to declare the profit. But if you meet any serious person who are looking into your figures, he's going to say that buying treasury to make money. I'm sorry, people like me sitting here can easily do it. You don't need any risk management strategy to do that. But that is what they have tended to do, which is very, very dangerous for the recovery of the economy. After what the economy has gone through 2022, 2023, and instead of you looking for the real loans, you continue to, and everybody the people who are giving the money, who are getting the treasury bills, the government has opened its mouth. So let us go there and give money to them. And we'll get there one fine morning. One fine morning. And what happened to the bonds would happen to the bills. And people will say, Dr. Triane said it.
Well, now they are getting the monies from the bill with very lucrative interest rate. Do you see that this is an indirect way that government is actually using to recapitalize the banks?
He can use the bills to recapitalize. You know, the IMF report specifically said that recapitalization plan be submitted to Bank of Ghana. And recently, the governor said that all banks that are supposed to recapitalize have submitted their plan. And I think the plan is on the course. And they have staggered the recapitalization over a 3-year period. But you see, the recapitalization per se is not only the DDEP. It is inflation has whittled away. You know, when they started 400 million, the dollar to the cedi, I think was about 5.6. And now the same 400 million has been whittled down because of inflation and the currency depreciation. So in this country, what is happening is that every 4 years, 5 years, we want banks to recapitalize. Instead of we looking at the microeconomic environment, controlling inflation, keeping the cedi stable, bringing fiscal discipline, all that, a shareholder sit down there every 4 years, they say do recapitalization. And I believe that Ghanaians and the country must be wary about this. Just about 5 years ago, bring 400 million. Now the 400 million divided by 12, I'm told it's about $36 million.
Yeah.
Who knows the next 4 years? Any amount you bring will be less than $10 million because inflation, currency depreciation are washing away the money like nobody's business.
Okay, so you don't believe that, I mean, one, we've spoken about the T-bill rates and the fact that banks are not clamoring over the bills because they see it to be lucrative. And then we've also spoken about the collapse, or what you say, a dead bonds market. And banks are now being given bonds to recapitalize. And I see this, I don't know if that's the reason why the governor feels that, you know, banks are beginning to be liquid.
Well, he makes the statement because the returns that we submit on liquidity clearly show that people are actually putting deposit there because they don't have any alternative. Currently, if anybody should ask you, if you don't want to put your money in a bank, where would you put? There are no alternative investment. In this country, there are no alternative investments. And it's by so doing, everybody seems to be giving money to the bank. But that does not equate the recapitalization. The recapitalization has come into play because the cedi has depreciated over time. Inflation has taken over the money. And again, the DDEP has also taken chunk of people's capital. So there are myriad of multifaceted of problems that is being drawn headlong for recapitalization of banks.
Right. As a result of this same DDP that we are talking about, one, we've seen banks participating. Two, most of them bought bonds. Now they can't have access to it. They have to wait for a certain period of time before they get it. Now they are using the T-bill because it's lucrative. And in your paper, you make mention of crowding out of the private sector. How long do you think that this will continue, and will the recapitalization of the banks, if it's done properly by Bank of Ghana, will it actually reduce the the crowding out situation that we see currently?
You know, the crowding out has been with us for a very long time. What it has done, what the DDEP has done at the moment is that there is what we call inverted yield curve. The inverted yield curve is very simple. What it means is that now shorter bills yield better than long term. And if you ask those investment people, anytime it happens like that, there is every indication that the economy is heading into economic recession. The crowding out has taken over the private sector. The private sector cannot compete with government offering 30-something% for T-bills. Because if you look at the economic environment at the moment, if you should even take a loan at the rate of 27%, I'm not sure you'll be able to pay back, because the cost of doing business is reasonably high. We have electricity charges, we have so many things, taxes all over the place. So, I mean, the private sector will not just go in and borrow money only to find out the money has gone into something else which he cannot repay. And don't forget, experience have also shown that government sector constitute a chunk of the businesses in Ghana. If it's not construction, it is buffer stock. If it is not buffer stock, it is this. If it is not that, it is that. And because the government are doing so many things, you were in this country when people who have supplied food to our grandchildren and children in secondary school for almost 2 years had to come and lay their pillows and bed in the offices of the people before they could be paid. I mean, and when these people are not being paid, they didn't take the money from anybody. They took it from the bank. And that will have impact on the non-performing. Another one that is happening, you know, there is what we call debt overhang, which I have written extensively about it. Even if you take the energy sector, there's so much debt overhang that yesterday I heard that the outstanding is 1.6 billion. Multiply 1.6 billion by 12. And that money that has gone to the energy, those IPPS or whatever, those providers, they are monies they have taken from the banks, or the money they have sourced from other people. And if all these are not being paid, it translates into non-performing.
These same IPPs are being asked to participate in, you know, a debt restructuring program.
Well, that is why you hear them resisting it. Because you see, if it is food, we're giving you food to eat. When you eat the food, and when it comes for you to pay me, you can't go to the woman selling cocoa or cocoa and katia to go and eat. And then later on you come and say come and negotiate. This negotiation should have been we've been talking about it since 2014. This problem has been with that since 13. People say it's take and pay. That is not only the problem. If you read the paper, you realize that the losses, the transmission losses, which people, instead of people calling it technical losses, when the Bank of Ghana make losses, people were saying that it was technical. It is the energy sector. When we are transmitting the power from the place we take to the end, the losses we make in this country is close to 27%. It's a literature, I have read it. And if the losses are 27%, and now you're calling people when you have taken the thing and you are making a loss by you not doing the right thing, you're telling them to come and renegotiate. This is going to be a tough negotiation because the service has already been provided. And they have, you know, they have a trump card. They are not like the bonds. This one, they can set the whole country, bam, nothing works. Nothing works. That is why the energy sector should have been treated fairly and equitably, and for them to understand and appreciate. But it is not only when you go about as if everything in this country you control, so you want them to listen to you. I bet you, the energy sector, I mean, I know some of the guys there, they are businessmen who are tried and tested, and they won't let it go easy.
Well, you speak of energy sector.
This debt overhang also translates into into the higher non-performing asset too. Because the monies they took some from the banks.
The banks, yeah.
And if you are not paying the IPPS, they cannot pay their loans. Simple as that. There is a correlation between what I'm saying.
So you're talking about a double whammy here. I mean, banks have already participated in the DDEP program. They are actually being impacted as a result of their participation. Now, their monies are with IPPs who currently, they say they need their money, and government is actually calling them to come to the negotiation table for a restructuring. So that's a double whammy for the banks, isn't it?
Well, you see, that is why, you see, it's always to bring myriad of people who are very knowledgeable about these things. When we started the DD, even before we started it, this debt overhang from IPPS has been there. I believe that they should have actually be able to sort it out first or talk to them, because it represents a chunk of the country's revenue. And if the banks have given money to them, and then you're telling them that, hey, I won't pay here, take a cut at the bonds, and then go and take a cut also from the people who are provided. They have to also be, so they have to think fast and say, look, we cannot go on like that. Well, the energy sector cannot be treated.
Let's talk more about the banks, because I mean, I'm interested in the casualties as a result of banks, participating in the DDEP, and this has actually necessitated the need to do a recapitalization. From where you sit, do you see any casualties in terms of the banks, their decision to participate in the domestic debt assistance program? Is there a casualty in terms of the liquidity and solvency situation of the banks? Hello, Doc.
When the recapitalization came, the original recapitalization, some banks went to GATS and they were giving bonds. And that very bonds has also been restructured. And that bond that were given to them, as if you are going to take GATS and they tell you that you have to pay 22 or 21% return on it. I find it very difficult for the shareholders who sign on. Because you see, if you took 100 million from GATS at 22%,
Hello, Doc. Right, so you are still watching UPFront on Joy News channel with me.
They're going to accumulate.
Okay. Doc is back. Doc, continue.
So the first year, we go to 122. And from 122, they work 22% on the 122. Don't crash the crisis. I said some of them are, I don't think people really talk through very well, because the cost of it was very, very unreasonably high. Even if it was a preferential debt, I don't think they deserve to be treated at that 22%. But unfortunately, bonds were also restructured. You see the double whammy. You took the government bond to support your system, and then when the restructuring was being done, you also took another cut. So, I mean, we are going about the banking sector.
Fortunately, we are losing Dr. Chan.
We have to be very, very careful, because banks thrive on confidence. And as people read to understand what is happening to the sector, it's not going to be easy for the banking sector.
Doc, so still, I mean, I want to know the magnitude.
Hello.
Doc, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I want to know the magnitude of the casualties that we are facing.
I can hear you.
Yeah. Can you tell me about the magnitude of the casualties to the banks, especially the domestic banks that participated in the DDEP?
Yeah, currently, in it, 4 of them are major casualties.
4 banks, 4 domestic banks.
Yes, are major casualties. Because already they were having challenges with their capital. And they took money from this area, GATS, and they have been also being destroyed. The others who got, like the one they have just recently recapitalized with 2.5 billion. I mean, I don't think these casualties should be resolved by giving bonds. I insist. Let us read the literature in 1980s when similar thing happened. What then governor did with the minister, the late Professor Kofi Agyei, they decided that central bank give the bonds to government weak bonds, discount it at the interest of 8%, and let them be put into liquidity. But if you go and give bonds and bonds and bonds and bonds, and when the market is not tradable, I don't see what you're going to. So their casualties are about four from the domestic side.
Domestic
Even
banks.
the revised DDEP, the casualties are about four.
So the first paper that you did, your first research, yes, there were about 8 banks, and this has been halved?
Yeah. There was originally, I think, 8 banks. Yeah,
8
9
banks. 9.
But when they revise it and tweak it, and when they reduce the maturity period from 15 years to 2031, it changed the scenario. It is only those who suffered earlier, like the bank they have just recapitalized, they have always received bonds. And they continue to receive bonds.
Yeah, Doc, this four domestic banks you speak of, were they already in the system before we did, the first banking sector cleanup? Were they there already, or they are banks that came after the banking sector cleanup?
Very sorry. We are the 1980s, and we have the last 2017 to 2017, 20 cleanups. Which of the cleanups? You're talking about the 2017?
2017, 2018. The most
they were there already. Yeah, they were there. They were here already.
So if they were there, then it means that, we did the cleanup so that the banks can become solvent. So why are they facing liquidity issues right now? I know it's because of the DDEP, but there should be something fundamentally wrong for the banks to be facing that same challenge they did face in 2017, 2018.
Let me give you a general overview. Elevated levels of non-performing over the last 5 years has been the common feature of the banking crisis that we had. The non-performing has consistently, from 2014, has grown over and over. Because you see, the non-performing affect capital, solvency, and liquidity. Because it is people deposit that was used in creating loans. Also, when the people come for their deposit, you can't tell them that the man hasn't paid you my loan, so I won't pay you. You are performing. Has consistently been with us. Service providers on time. I know a service provider, I know a contractor. I don't want to mention his name. He did the job in 2017. As I speak to you, he hasn't been paid. And this stands in the book of a bank. The bank will write them off. And this would affect their capital. And this would affect their liquidity. So if the government was readily paying these people, if he has scheduled himself to pay that this year, I'm going to pay contractors who have done road, that we will be sitting here, has been a challenge for the banks over the last 6 years. And that has actually affected both the solvency and liquidity.
So you have 2 separate groups in this banking space. We've largely spoken about the domestic banks. There's also the foreign bit. So why is it that these 4 banks exposed to solvency issues? Why are they all domestic and not? Why don't we have any of the foreign banks in there? Do they have anything that they're actually relying on?
You see, when we did the first one, most of the foreign banks were hit, especially South African and Nigerian banks. But when you tweaked it, it means that the losses they made last year, there will be as we come to the first quarter, where the banks will be publishing, you'll be seeing a huge write-backs for some of the banks, and that will put them on a good level, because one bank I know he's going to have a write back of 2 billion. It's a foreign bank because it was one of the banks who actually wrote everything off. He wrote 2.2 billion to hit his capital. Now, after the revision, he is going to make a lot of profits that will help him to improve his position. So the foreign banks, those who participated, are not in the same boat as some of the Ghanaian banks did.
Well, I know in other countries that actually also did a domestic debt exchange program where there were foreign banks and banks had to take a risk. Some of the foreign banks actually threatened to leave. Do you see the same situation actually panning out in our situation?
A very interesting answer from you. I think from where I sit, I think there were a lot of pressure from the owners of the banks, the foreign banks, when the first GDP came without losses. Because you see, if you have taken somebody's deposit and then instead of you paying him and you write them off and say that go and bring another capital, he's going to tell you that, my brother, I came to be here, but if this is what is going to continue, maybe I want to leave. Can you take your bank, give me my capital and let me go back? When you are faced with that challenge, you have a better option to go to Bank of Ghana. I'm giving you a secret. This is a secret. That is why they decided to go and hit Bank of Ghana. Because those good ones who have been here, I won't mention names. There have been very, very good banks, foreign banks who have been here. And if they were told you that, look, the way you are treating us, we find it very difficult to participate. You have no option to look for other alternative. So now that he has done the final one, and the impact is not as huge as the first one, I think the foreign banks are not going to suffer. They will. Some will do some small.
So if I get you right, Doc, if I get you right, you are saying that some of the foreign banks threaten to actually leave the space if government.
I don't have empirical evidence, but what I can say that from where I sit, if I bought a bonds 2 billion and you've written it off and I'm taking a huge losses, and you say go and bring money from South Africa, go and bring money from Nigeria. If I bought Nigerian bonds, I wouldn't have faced the same challenge because if we look at the GDP ratio, I thought Nigeria is one of the lowest in the whole world. But when people talk, they talk as if that Nigeria. So if you bought the Nigerian bonds or South African bonds, I'm not sure you'll be called upon to take such a hit. So I'm sure when they did all the scenarios with their financial advisors and legal advisors, they decided to say, Charlie, why are we going to do this to ourselves? Why don't we see what the central bank can do? That's why the central bank was used as the lamb who was slain,
Right. So the finance minister, Doc, says, the DDP, we've actually concluded it. But we've seen the participation of the commercial banks in the T-bill rate where government is borrowing heavily each week. Do you think that the DDP has been concluded, or you think that there will be another round as a result of these activities going on in the treasury bill space?
The way the government has turned its eye on the treasury bill, seriously, I'm not very comfortable at all. But I said the same thing when the bonds. I remember 2021 in one of my space lecture. I said that the way the bonds are being treated, one day we'll get up in the morning and we'll have a challenge. The way everybody wants to go to the treasury because the interest is attractive. Everybody is going there. Who knows what can happen? Because it's the same debt, and these are more expensive. Because 1 year was 19.1. Now 1 year for treasury bill is about 27 or 28. So which one? Which one do you think is cheaper? But he has turned his eye there and borrowing as if nothing is happening. And it's becoming what we used to call when we were young. When the 1996, people came here as Pram and R5. You borrow here, you give here, you borrow there, you give there, you borrow this money, you give there. And this is exactly what is going to happen. And I believe that the banks should now must be risk conscious and see what they are doing, because something can happen. I'm not predicting about the way we are borrowing from that end. We are almost 1 year, a month is gone, and we are borrowing at that level. I believe the treasury, when the treasury bill was done, one of my 15%, but it hasn't happened.
Yeah,
because I thought government would reduce some of these expenditures so that we'll cut our coat according to our cloth.
we have a big assurance from the finance minister saying that T-bills will not be part of the exchange program. What do you have to say about that one too? I mean, you are saying that in the bonds market, we are confident that there's nothing going to be like a restructuring, but we've seen it in the T-bill space. I mean, government is borrowing at a very high rate. Do we see, or should we actually go ahead and believe what the finance minister says when he actually assured us that T-bills will not be part of the entire restructuring process?
For me, to believe somebody must have empirical data and empirical evidence. I believe in data and science. I believe in data, and I believe what I have seen, what I have observed. I cannot back that statement. Is it not the same person who said no IMF, no IMF? Is it not the same people who said it? So for me, I don't take people's word for a dime or a cedi, because if I'm a bank, as I'm saying, if I have a bank, I'm going to warn my risk people that please learn from the past mistakes. Because if you continue the way you're buying the treasury bills, by the half year, the debt will be almost equivalent of what was happening with the bonds. And they will tell you that they had to restructure it. And don't forget, in other jurisdictions, treasury bill in Russia and Ukraine, when they did that, they restructured treasury bills. They did restructure treasury bills. You can go and check the literature. And it didn't go well at all.
Doc, in our case, there's one T-bill, special T-bill that we've actually restructured, which is the cocoa bills.
Yes. At last, thank you very much. You have given me a typical example of what I'm saying. If cocoa bills were T-bills and have been restructured in such a way, I mean, what can't be done? And when he wants to do it, he will do it. So at least there is empirical evidence of the cocoa bills. So you can take it from that point.
I mean, it's been less than, I think, 6 years since we did the banking sector cleanup. Do you see that per what is happening and the empirical data that you actually have in your repository, do you see another banking sector cleanup in the next years to come?
You see, banking sector cleanup must have a clear objective and specific objective. The first one, I don't falter the current people. That was in 2014. Report, and it was reformed. That thing was not done. By the way, we have done this all reforming, restructuring, or whatever you call it, reforming and everything. If you sit where I sit, I won't be surprised that there can be another reform. Because at least if you talk about capitalization,
Doc, I didn't get that. You said there has to be another what?
What Ghanaians haven't forgotten is that.
You said there will be another thing that will happen.
What I'm saying is that from where I sit and the way I look, there can be another reform.
Okay.
Yes, there can be, because recapitalization is one of the reforms, and they are calling for recapitalization. Governor has said it, and I'm not saying anything. He said it. I think I read it, and that is it. But all these things involved, what I want us to look at it is that until we get the macro inflation down, stable currency, which we are not going to get it today or tomorrow. Because if you are not producing enough to export, there's no way your cedi can be stable. No way. I repeat it, and I want to repeat it. Let those who challenge me come and challenge. A country that export, look at cocoa, less than 800 million tons, $800 million or so.
Right, Doc.
Look at gold. You have done a gold job. How much do we get from gold? How much do we get from gold? You export 6.6 billion, right? And you only earn 865. And you think that can help you for extractive industry? I doubt it.
So final one, Doc. What do you think should be? Hello, Doc.
I'm there.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have to wrap up. I want to take your view on this. What do you think should be the perfect way that Bank of Ghana can recapitalize the banks? Should it be through bonds, which probably will have some coupons, or there should be another way?
Well, I would go on the first one we did in the 80s. That was handled by World Bank and IMF. All that they did is that the bonds were given to the banks, but you go to Bank of Ghana, there's a secretariat. Then they would discount it, I think, interest of 8%, and they give you the liquidity, the money, and you come and put it in your bank. That is the only way. But you see, by giving bonds to me, it doesn't even satisfy IRS 13. Because you see, a country that has defaulted in just a year, reissuing bonds. Which country is this? So they should look at the recapitalization strategy vis-a-vis the Financial Stability Fund, which they say they have $500 million plus 250 from the World Bank, and do it properly so that banks that need capital in terms of to support liquidity and solvency, they will not be found wanting. Because if I'm dealing with a bank who has been given a bond on the interbank market, that bank should ask me lend me 20 million overnight. I'll tell you no, because when you default, there's no way I can get my money back. Right. All these things they are doing affect the banking sector. And we have done it before. Let me repeat. 88, the late Dr. Kwesi Boche did it perfectly, 100%. Go and read the literature. Why are we trying to create something new when there has been already something?
Right. Doc, thank you very much for, sharing your thoughts on this big issue. I'm sure that we'll have to have a part 2 of this conversation. And folks, this is where time will allow us to peg our conversation. My guest was Dr. Richmond Ituahine, banking consultant. Joy News Prime is up next.